Ed here with the Digital Digest, and today I wanted to share a comparison between the Lenovo Yoga 9i 14-inch edition on the left and the HP Spectre x360 14t on the right. Now they're both roughly $1,700 US. They both have gorgeous displays. They both have pen input out of the box. They both have great keyboards. They both have great trackpads and solid battery life, as well as best-in-class Wi-Fi performance. And of course, last but not least, Intel's 11th gen Tiger Lake i7 processors driving the experience. So what's not to like? Really nothing. So this video, the entire premise, is to help you decide which machine is right for you. So let's start off with audio-visual performance. Here we go. Give this to see if we get them on sync here, in sync. There we go. I'm going to stop them both right there because I want you to be able to get a feel for the audio out of each, because one thing I will tell you right now is that while both are fantastic, the audio on the Lenovo is slightly better, and that's merely engineering and, quite frankly, the fact that the Yoga has that sound bar just like its predecessor. It is, in my opinion, the best soundstage on any laptop, but that does not mean that the Spectre does not have great audio. It does, and coming from HP, which in my experience is not generally known for great audio performance, that's a big deal, especially since the 14T is a brand new addition to the Spectre 2-in-1 lineup with, again, that 13.5-inch 3:2 aspect ratio AMOLED display. And you can get this in a traditional IPS display as well. This is a custom configuration, that's why it is blue. I mentioned they're both roughly $1,700 US, and I'll get into all of that, as I mentioned, later. But let's take a listen now just to the Yoga and then just to the HP. And by the way, volume is 100%, as is screen brightness. Now let's listen to that exact same section on the Spectre 14T. So you can see the Spectre just can't get as loud or as rich, but the audio does not have distortion, and it is really loud still for an ultra portable that weighs 3 pounds. And by the way, these are both 3 pounds, which is amazing. That's why, again, they both really do represent the epitome of ultrabook performance, let alone the fact that they're both 2-in-1s with pen input. So now let's move away from that sample and talk about the actual quality of the panels themselves. You saw video playback. They're both gorgeous, but if you prefer the 3:2 aspect ratio with the vertical size increase, then obviously the 14T is going to speak to what you want to purchase, because nothing like this has ever been available. On the other hand, if you don't care that much about the AMOLED or 3:2 aspect ratio, I'm going to tell you right now, you will be equally pleased with the 4K IPS 16:9 panel that the Yoga sports. Color fidelity is incredibly good. In fact, this is one of the few IPS panels where I don't have it side by side with the AMOLED counterpart and say, you know, the AMOLED just blows it out of the water. However, the AMOLED does have better color accuracy. HP also does give you color profiles out of the box, standard with the Spectre line, and that, for me at least, is something I do prefer. However, I would not feel like I was slumming it with the IPS panel here. As I mentioned, both roughly 400 nits of brightness, so they're bright They're really nice. Pixel density, of course, does go to the UHD panel, but 3000 by 2000, no slouch. But as you probably noticed when playing video, we did have letterboxing because, again, this is not a native 16 by 9 aspect ratio with UHD resolution. So you're going to have letterboxing. Do I think that's a big deal? No. So now that we've gotten the screen quality out of the way and audio quality out of the way, let's talk about the keyboards. In my opinion, the HP has the better keyboard, not just because I prefer it, but because it is the better keyboard. Better key travel, the shape of the keys, the overall feel, the bounce, it's all better in the HP, more natural. It feels like what a keyboard should. That's not to say that the Yoga has a bad keyboard. It doesn't. Still a very good keyboard, just not as good as the HP. When we get to the actual trackpad or touchpad, here we've got something new that you haven't seen on any PC. Very similar, of course, to what Apple employs, which is a piece of glass with no mechanical actual actuation, but rather haptic feedback to represent the clicking system. So, is that a good thing? I think yes. Is it necessarily a good first implementation? Not so much, only because of the very thin line, nearly impossible, I won't say impossible, you can feel it, but very hard to detect where the trackpad begins and ends. So without looking, you can feel it, but it's so subtle that in many ways I prefer the larger, more traditional trackpad found on the HP. And by the way, the 14T has the largest touchpad of any of the Spectres. Oddly enough, even bigger than its 15T counterpart. So remember that. Both are nice, but somehow the Spectre is larger. Also, the glass that extends, that coordinates with the trackpad, it's all one piece of glass. It is a fingerprint magnet. It does give a premium feel, but this all again becomes a matter of personal preference and overall taste in the aesthetic. But when it comes to functionality, both are very good. The feel is more premium on the Yoga, but as I said, not being able to tell where the trackpad ends is a pretty big issue. Another point I wanted to make about the keyboard, which I always mention and always will, is that I love that HP has dedicated mute buttons that actually have LED indicators. The camera kill switch also has an LED indicator and now actually gives you physical privacy. Speaking of web cameras, both have privacy features. We've got a physical switch on the Yoga, but do keep in mind that only the HP is capable of Windows Hello facial recognition. The Yoga, for some odd reason, Lenovo continues to omit that from the Yoga lineup, and I wish they would implement it because these are both top of the line for each respective manufacturer, and it's almost 2021, farts throw. So come on, let's get some true IR capability. However, that doesn't mean that either of these webcams are good. Unfortunately, that's one area, neither improved. So I think that's something we will see down the line, an improvement in the webcam microphone quality, because manufacturers have to wake up to that since, come on, we've been in a pandemic this whole year, and if anything needs to be better in these laptops, especially these two, the only thing I'm going to knock, webcam performance. Now, with that said, that doesn't mean the mics are bad, but the 720p quality has got to go. With that out of the way, both have fingerprint scanners. This one is actually on the keyboard rather than the deck, the HP, whereas the Yoga has it where it always has been. I believe this is also splash resistant, but please don't try to get either of these machines wet. When I say splash, I mean if you have a little bit of water on your hands and you touch this, it's not going to have a problem reading, nor will you damage it. But do not get these wet. They are not water resistant. With that said, let's talk about battery life. Now, in my experience, both of these, very good. And that's the shocking part, because traditionally 4K or even 3000 by 2000 did not equate to solid battery life. The good news here is that it does. You're looking at roughly the same battery life with both. Takes about a little over an hour to charge to 100% from a completely dead battery. And you're going to get somewhere between 7 and 9, even possibly 10 hours of battery life, depending on your settings and what you're doing. I do generally run the HP and the Yoga at roughly 50% brightness, but if you really want to get those big beastie battery numbers, you're going to have to go to battery saver and take it real low. Just to remind you, both of these are at full brightness right now, and just to remind you also what they look like when you take it down. So 50, this is below 50, that's what they look like. Now on camera, This, I think, still looks brighter, but either way, you're not going to be disappointed with either of these, so keep that in mind. So, battery life, very good. Now, if you're pushing these to the max, heavy loads, you are not trying to save power, then you're going to be looking at something that would be more traditional to the 4K or nearly 4K resolution, which is going to be around 6 to 7 hours. That's still very good, considering you can get a lot more out of them if you don't push them to the limit. Moving away from battery life, let's talk about the actual processor. 1185G7, 1165G7, Intel's 11th Gen Tiger Lake CPUs, both significant because even though the 1185 is spec'd slightly higher clock speed, real-world performance benchmarking, a wash. In fact, I've had this machine outbench this machine. Now that may have to do with thermals because, believe it or not, the HP, which I did not expect it, has been cooler. In fact, in threshold and throttling tests, this machine is able to keep it really, for the most part, under load to around 80 Celsius, a little bit higher, whereas I've seen the Yoga spike higher than that. So keep that in mind. 4K video editing, not a problem on either of these. Photo editing, of course, also not a problem. I do wish that the Yoga standard came with a 1 terabyte NVMe drive, but then again, the Spectre is a custom config with its 1 terabyte. Both have very good NVMe's. You're not going to have any performance problems at all. Some best-in-class stuff here. Wi-Fi 6 chipset, also best in class. So from a connectivity standpoint, both are excellent. You don't have to worry about that at all. Pen input, I'm going to get to in a moment, but I want to point out the HP's pen is not pocketed or garaged like it is on the Lenovo. So HP has redone the pen. It is a significant improvement. It charges, I'm trying to slide it up, via Type-C right here. Doesn't take long to charge. LED indicator right here. I'll show you what that looks like. I've shown this in pretty much every video I've done covering the Tiger Lake refresh. Amber is when it's charging. White is when it's completed. This does have new drivers. Performance is better. My fiance, who is the artist of the family, has stressed that she feels it's an improvement. However, I will point out that pen input on both of these, while good, still is not going to outperform something like the Galaxy Tab S7 Plus. So keep that in mind. And that is really a good reference point about the fact that Windows, at least the software, in this case, Sketchbook Pro or Sketchbook from Autodesk, still doesn't provide the best experience that it could. So I'm not going to put that on the manufacturers. I'm going to put that on the software manufacturers. So maybe better software one day, but for now, pen input is good, but I wouldn't invest in this for professional use. That's not to say that it's not good enough for some of you, but for note-taking, sketching, I think it's perfectly fine. Again, this is coming from the artist in the family. She prefers the Tab S7 Plus, but thinks both of these are marked improvements from their predecessors, which she was able to do inking tests on both of, fortunately. So we do have a solid reference point. It is nice that the pen is garaged here. However, the pen is so small, I'm going to show it to you right now, that it's not ideal. And just taking a look right here, you can see it's pocketed right at that corner. So if I go ahead and just pull it out, seeing some of the pet furs plentiful here. This is based on Wacom drivers, which are generally superior. However, because this is such a thin stylus, you're going to find yourself pinching this thing. A much more natural experience with the HP Tilt 2.0. Both have 2 buttons, but again, this just makes me want to replace it. So this is kind of great that it docks and charges up to 80% in 15 seconds with those contacts, but not so great in that, again, you are somewhat stuck with a stylus that reminds me of something from 10 years ago. Now, another thing I want to talk about that I do think is important with both of these is practicality. I've mentioned the Tiger Lake processor and how good it is for photo and video editing. Gaming. Neither of these are gaming laptops, obviously. They're ultrabooks that get great battery life and really don't show any form of compromise. Even pricing, by the way, this year is softer, at least on the HP, than it was last year, which I think is fantastic. But when you look at what both of these machines are capable with the Intel Iris Xe graphics, it's kind of amazing because you are able to game in full HD just about any title with medium to low settings. Traditionally, ultrabooks like this, up until Ice Lake, couldn't really game at all. Old stuff, sure. You wanted to play CSGO, no problem. Here, you actually can play modern titles. I've got Call of Duty World War II on here. Haven't tested Cyberpunk out yet, but I'm not expecting much. I am expecting to play, full HD, low settings though, and get 60 frames. GTA, I already tried on both of these. That is GTA 5, of course. Full HD, low settings, 60 frames, not a problem on either one. So that's pretty amazing. So while you may not be playing Cyberpunk at medium, older titles, we're talking about 1 year to 2 years old, you're not going to have any issues, no sweat. Now, the next thing I know everyone wants to know, I've mentioned thermals. Let's talk about, besides how hot they get, and by the way, they both get hot. Neither will fry an egg, so that's good news. But believe it or not, the Yoga, I was shocked by this, and I've already kind of mentioned that the 14T has better thermals. The Yoga I have found kicking on fans more often than the 14T. Now, that doesn't make the 14T perfect. The 14T, when the fans do kick on, make their own kind of sound that I haven't heard out of any of the other Spectres. So the 13T and 15T do not emit the same sound when they are cooling the machine. Go figure. Another thing I want to point out is that with the HP, historically, you could not run in performance mode without being connected to your 65-watt charger. Now you can. That, to me, is pretty important. That's something I wish my Ice Lake 13T could do that it can't. And by the way, that applies to the 15 and 13-inch models as well. Let's go ahead and take a look at that pen input because I know some of you, or many of you, will be curious about that. So let's go ahead. Did I have Sketchbook? No, I don't have it on the desktop there, but I know it's installed. And I will just show you quickly what that looks like. And again, I'm impressed. I'm not the artist in the family. I already stated that. But nonetheless, it's something that is standard with this, right? I mean, you can see right here this sketch of a facade that the artist, as I've stated in the family, did. She was impressed. She thought the performance was good. And when you look at latency as I draw on this, it is lagging behind a little bit, but that's pretty much the same experience you're going to have over here. A little bit tighter with the Lenovo. I would love to tell you that's because of the processor, but it's not. It isn't. So, whichever one you're writing on, I can't write lefty, so it's like I almost went to go with the HP pen. That will not work. These are based on N-Trig. You're not going to have a problem. My handwriting was a little worse on the Lenovo, but that's on me. Both are really good. Excuse the scribble, but it's just, you're not going to have a problem with writing on these. I'm going to call the pen experience a wash. A little bit of an edge to the Lenovo, but that comes at the expense of the inferior stylus. So you're going to probably want to buy a true stylus for this machine, but both have some of the best-in-class pen input you're going to get out there, okay, on a 2-in-1 in 2020, the end of 2020, really 2021. Do I think they're ideal, again, for artists that make their living in sketching or painting digitally? No. I think that they're Wacom products for that purpose for a reason, but they are both great at being 2-in-1s, and that's exactly what they're supposed to deliver. The pen, if I didn't mention it already, does stick to the HP on the left side of the machine. It will stick when closed. When open, pretty loose, but when the lid is closed, it'll stay on there pretty tight, and I am happy with that connection. And you can also slot it into the sleeve that comes with this machine as well. So we've gone over display quality, the display differences, the audio quality, the keyboard quality, the webcam quality, touch or trackpad, whatever you want to call it. Build quality, both are excellent. I do feel that the Yoga feels a little bit more solid, but that in no way is a commentary on the Spectre not feeling solid. I just feel like the Spectre has a little bit more of a hollow feel, but that could just be in my head. In terms of form factor, I'm going to say they're a wash because they will take up the same amount of space in a bag, whereas the 13T undercuts both of them, even though it only weighs a little bit less than them. So, at the end of the day, the only thing left to show you are the I/O. So let's get to that. and also, of course, 2-in-1 commentary. So with the Yoga, nothing to protect the keyboard around it. Whereas with the Spectre, we have these 4 nubs so that when you actually flip the machines into content consumption or a sketch mode like this, the keyboard on the left is not protected, whereas with the 14T, the keyboard will be protected. And for some of you, that will be a difference maker. No question about it. It's really a matter, again, of personal preference on whether or not you're concerned about the keyboard deck combo getting scratched up. But both have pretty solid hinges, a little bit of play, but to me, this is about as good as it gets when it comes to build quality. And if I just see, that could have possibly scratched the deck. These are review units. I'm not trying to send back anything harmed. I always take good care of these. But now you see the back of each of these machines, or bottom. And the bottom on the Yoga, you've got ventilation, a little bit of rubber. Same thing here. Very similar in terms of the bottom of the machines. What is very different, though, the top of the machines. And that's because the Yoga does have a leather finish. Now, this isn't going to collect a lot of fingerprints. It can get stained. I happen to like it. I wasn't sure about it. You know, this reminded me of Dell. Oh God, how many years ago was it with the leather trim? It's not the first time it's been, and HP still does stuff with leather too. And I've never been a huge fan of it. I have owned machines with leather back in the day, but I will say that the Yoga does, it's grown on me. We'll just put it at that. The beautiful part about the Poseidon Blue 14T is that it is basically fingerprint free, and that's whether you've got clams or, you know, sand dry hands. It doesn't really matter. This thing isn't going to look gross and dirty, whereas if you took a quick look at the bottom of this machine, it looks like, you know, the crime lab could collect 1 million prints. Not a knock against it, just something you should be aware of. But really well built. I think that both of these machines are examples for everyone to learn from in the business. Now, in terms of I/O, a Type A USB port right there. We've got 2 Thunderbolt 4 ports and a headphone jack. You are going to be charging the machine using these Thunderbolt 4 ports. Get that in focus if I can, huh? So keep that in mind. But very limited on the I/O, keeping it really clean. Front lip just has the Yoga branding right there. And by the way, you will have an easier time opening this one-handed for all of you one-hand opening testaholics. I'll do that in a moment. Power button on the right side. And then, of course, the garage pen back here in its slot or garage, which is out right now. Now, the 14T, on the other hand, a little bit more I/O going for it. I prefer it, frankly. We've got a micro SD card slot right there, which I wish that the Yoga had. If there was one thing that I would tell you right now is missing, it's absolutely having some form of card reader. And for those of you who think it's not a necessity, as a photographer, videographer, content creator, it's a must-have for me. I want a machine where I don't have to carry around extra crap. This makes a big difference because right now I am recording on a 1 terabyte SanDisk micro SD card. So you get the picture. We've got Thunderbolt 4, you are going to charge using one of these 2. Headphone jack, nothing on the back of the machine other than ventilation. And then a Type A USB port on the left side. And this is the opportunity to show you where the pen slots on and actually stays on quite well. And I do like this. It reminds me of Surface products. And HP kind of has this implemented on the 15T. Not on the 13T, but the 14T is the best example. And right now I have to say, and I didn't think I'd say this, I do believe the 14T is the best of the Spectre lineup. And that's interesting because it's also the first time that it's been offered. And usually first-gen products don't take the medal. You know, they aren't the medal winners, but I have to say, battery life, performance, the thermals, the lack of throttling, not complete lack, but for the most part, really makes the 14T shine, especially with that 3000 by 2000 AMOLED. If you want the 3:2 aspect ratio, you just will not find a better machine. So, the one-handed test, for those of you that love that crap. Let's do it. So you've got a more defined lip with the Yoga, which makes the Yoga easier to one-hand open. But once you get to about a 90-degree angle, almost there, it does start to lift on the bottom. You probably saw that. The 14T is not going to fare as well. almost as well. You can see that's how far we got with the 14T before it was starting to lift. But that's pretty much it. Overall, as I stated at the beginning, you can't go wrong with either of these. They both have fantastic quad-core processors. They both can game in full HD, most titles, again, at low and medium settings. 4K video editing I've been doing on both, no problems at all. Again, a lot of you will say, well, I should get the 1185 G7 in the Yoga because it's the better processor. Benchmarking and overall experience speaks to otherwise. I generally would say the 1185 is special because you can find the 1165 CPU in budget machines. But truth be told, as I've said over and over again through this video, I can't really tell you that I see any real-world performance difference, and even in benchmarking, they're so close. I've seen this machine outperform the Yoga on several occasions, and vice versa. So that means do not go with the Yoga just because it has the 1185 G7. Initially, I thought that it would inherently make it better. The good news is it doesn't. So at the end of the day, this really does come down to, in my opinion, which one you think is the nicer machine and whether or not you prefer having the 3:2 aspect ratio or the 16:9 4K display. Considering they both have great displays, color accuracy is better with the HP, but not by enough that I would say, hey, you shouldn't be getting the Yoga, because they're both, I think, color critical enough for the majority of users who are in the market for a 2-in-1 experience. Both are incredibly clean. Again, great battery life. They're going to be able to handle anything you throw at them. And that's the beauty of both of these here in late 2020 and going into 2021. I don't see anything that knocks them off the block from any of the competition. So that's reassuring because there's always a pitfall. By the way, both of them have soldered RAM, so know the build you need. And now let's talk about that because I haven't this whole time. So this was a custom configuration that HP put together for me. As I mentioned, 16 gigs of RAM, 1 terabyte NVMe. It's not the Intel one with the 32 gigs, but still very, very fast. Here, a 0.5 terabyte. Now, Lenovo really, at this price point, should be giving us all 1 terabyte, but this is a pre-built. You can find both of these at Best Buy, not in the Poseidon Blue. I do not recommend the black color on the Spectre. I've never liked it, and it's a fingerprint magnet. I would go blue or silver. They're both, in my opinion, the sharper color, and also they just don't get dirty as quickly because they don't collect fingerprints, again, like a crime scene. The Yoga, on the other hand, if you want the 4K IPS panel and all the bells and whistles in this review unit, you have to get the leather. I don't think that is avoidable, but if you opt for the full HD version, you can, of course, get the regular metal top. Here, you can go IPS full HD with the HP. Both are going to be less expensive. Both are going to have better battery life. So if battery life is more important to you than the resolution offered by either of these, do yourself a favor and go full HD. You don't need to have the AMOLED 3000 by 2000 or the UHD IPS panel. You can just go full HD. You will be happy. I've seen, at least on the Yoga, what the full HD panel looks like. It's good, and I can't imagine HP's panel being bad considering what I've seen out of them in the past. So I don't think you're going to have problems, but again, I'm only reviewing 4K and the 3000 by 2000 AMOLED. Now, pen input you've seen, it's good on both. Some of you will prefer the Wacom experience offered by the Yoga, but I would make the argument, as I did through the course of this video, that it's pretty much a wash. And the pricing on these builds, again, really similar. This machine, just not in this color, retails at Best Buy, your big box store, for $1,700. If you go with HP, and I'll include links for both of these, affiliate links, if you want to, help the channel grow, I appreciate it, of course, as usual. This machine will be less expensive direct through HP. They have sales all the time. That is the benefit of going direct with HP. The downside is that the return process, the exchange process, isn't the best. And that's not just an HP thing. That's a Dell thing. That's a Lenovo thing. Whenever you go direct with manufacturers, they're just a bigger pain in the ass to deal with. But Again, if you want to get the best deal, trust me, it's going to be direct. That applies to both machines. If you want the most flexible return policy, which all of us here in America enjoy, and if you didn't know it, that's not something anyone else in the world enjoys. Somehow we're entitled to it. We have consumer protections that really don't exist anywhere else in the world. Then the big box stores are your blessing, because I never recommend you buy it to try it. Don't do that, please. It's bad for all of us. We all end up paying for it. Try to make an educated decision. After all, what are you watching this video for? But if you have anything wrong with the machine, it will be very easy to exchange it. So if something's DOA or defective on either one of these, you know you can just ship it back to Best Buy. They'll ship out a replacement unit, or they'll make you reorder it. I don't recommend going into stores, but some of you don't care, so you'll do that. Either way, the point is the process will be easier, but you will pay for that convenience. So that's really a decision for you to make. I personally, last year when I bought my 13T, purchased it from Best Buy, went through so many problems with defective units that I then went direct, because I didn't want Best Buy to want to ban me because of 2 exchanges. So third time was a charm, direct from HP. Thankfully, I didn't have to worry about returning it or exchanging it. That doesn't mean that wouldn't have been a nightmare too. It would have. But HP also ended up being a better deal overall. I got a 2 terabyte NVMe drive for just a little bit more, whereas that's not a possibility if you're buying it from Best Buy. I also was able to get the color I preferred and the Tilt pen, which thankfully has been revised now with the Tilt 2.0. Big difference, both in the pen tip, performance, and the actual pen itself, because there is a flat side to the brand new Tilt. So keep that in mind, even though this one did charge using Type-C as well. So at the end of the day, I think it really boils down to, since now it should be abundantly clear that there is nothing that one can do and the other can't, except for at least Windows Hello, and the fact that one has a different aspect ratio than the other, and resolution and panel type. When it comes to computing tasks, multimedia, pen input, these both are going to be able to do whatever you need. It's that simple. Remember, they're not gaming laptops. If you want a desktop replacement that can game, you're going to be spending more money, and you're going to be carrying a lot more than 3 pounds. But when it comes to portability and power and flexibility, nothing will beat the Yoga 9i 14, and nothing will beat the 14T from the Spectre. So I think at the end of the day, it really is just a matter of your preference on design and the screen itself, because everything else is just great. Now, for those of you that want to know my opinion, which one I would pick, I have to say, I've been really drawn to the Yoga. The 1185 G7 made me think initially that it was going to be the better of the two, but for me, the HP 14T is the winner. It stays cooler, it stays quieter than the Yoga. Now, it's not an extreme difference, but it's a difference. Even in prepping for this video, while this machine was sitting, it was idling while it was asleep. And one thing I didn't mention that I had planned to, and I'm glad I remembered, if you've made it this far to 33 minutes, is that last generation. So that was, not the 9i, but I'm going to base it off of the 13T and what we have now with the 14T and the C940. The C940 did a better job of battery management when sleeping and waking up. It was pretty much flawless, whereas HP had a few more hiccups. This generation, the HP actually is doing a better job when it's asleep in terms of not trickling that battery too much, so there's no vampire effect going on, and the waking up seems to be more seamless as well. In fact, even when I open them now, I don't think we're going to see a huge difference, but it should be fairly instant on both of them. See, there you saw the Yoga woke up quicker, so go figure. It's a little bit wishy-washy, but on the battery management side of things, the HP, it's a marked improvement from last gen. So I'm not here to tell you the HP is killing the Yoga on battery consumption when sleeping or when turned off, aka standby, but it is a huge improvement from the Ice Lake generation. So this refresh has had a significant improvement in many ways, but that's a key that maybe you didn't expect. Lenovo last year, I thought, had mastered the sleep and wake process and lack of battery consumption. This machine pretty much continues in the same footprint, but again, I've seen the fans kick up for no reason, whereas here, that really is not happening. And I know a lot of you are more worried about fan noise and thermals than anything else, considering you already know what you're getting with that 11th gen i7 quad-core CPU, even if this one's clocked a little bit faster. You're going to get the same capability no matter which machine you buy. At any rate, hope this review was helpful. Hope it helped you make a decision. That's one other view I want to give you between the 14T and the 9i14, just so you see it. Again, they're both literally 3 pounds, but as you can see, of course, the HP is taller and not as wide, and that's going to be one of those things that helps you make the choice. At least they both have great everything, and that's not something I was sure we were going to have. After all, the 14T is a brand new category for HP, and the 9i has a new name, but it's really very much the same. I didn't mean to rhyme, except for the leather implementation here. So, as I said at the top of the video, time for a little bit of reincorporation. You cannot go wrong with either of these, but hopefully at this point, you now know which is right for you. They're both amazing. You won't be disappointed. I can assure you of that. I wish I could get one. Unfortunately, these are both going back. They're loaners. Any questions or comments, please feel free to post them. Hit that like button. And as usual, please feel free to subscribe and please stay safe. Later.